A new fuse panel, all wired and labeled neatly. You see, got my interior lights, have my anchor light, my running lights. Where's my blower, bilge pump, and then my electronics. I have my depth finder and my radio on the electronic side of it. Everything, like I said, went nicely, with the exception of my gas gauge. It doesn't work. It was working last year. I don't know what went wrong. Me and my infinite wisdom, I pulled the sender out of the tank, and in that process I proceeded to screw it up. So I'm gonna have to buy a new one. I think it was the fuel sender anyway, but I have power going to the fuel gauge. I have ground to the fuel gauge, and I've traced this wire all the way back. Now, this ground wire is not connected. It's actually up here. It just comes out right here, and it's not connected to anything. Never was. I don't know what it went to, but of course this ground wire goes back to the instrument cluster where all the grounds happen. Now, the bad thing is that all of this is super corroded. I don't know if you can see that or not. I'm just going to turn the light on here. There we go. You can see now. All of these are like super corroded down here tremendously. Now I'm still getting 9.85 volts down to here. I don't know if that's what it's supposed to have or if that's just the sending, but whenever I have the ignition on, I have 12 volts, or no, I'm sorry, 9.85 volts here. If anybody can tell me how to test the gas gauge itself to see if it works, I just don't want to go touching those wires together with voltage. And I don't know if I can just make up a simple rheostat that'll be able to adjust it, because that's basically all the sending unit was. So I guess I'll order a new sending unit tomorrow and see if that was a problem. And then what I'm going to do, I also have this nice little 20 amp circuit breaker here. This is the ignition. This is what actually, sends the power up to the panel and to the back to tell the engine it's okay to run. The only thing I have left to do is, this is my trim wires. I have one 12 volt and then an up and down trim that runs through the relay inside of here. And then I have my trim wires that are hanging down right here that I need to join together right here. But it's Sunday, about 6:30. I'm tired. I don't feel like messing with it anymore. And of course, here's the radio, which goes here. We've got a Alpine radio that goes in there, and then it needs to be rehooked up. I traced all the original wiring that somebody had stuffed back up into the behind the kick seats in the front, which I have a ground, and I have a switch, and I have a constant, which is nice, so that way the thing won't keep losing its memory like it was before. Somebody had run a separate power and ground back to the battery, and it was going out every time we disconnected. So the electrics are, I'd say, probably 99% done. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm a little discouraged about the fuel, the gas sending unit, and I hope it has nothing to do with this little bastard down here. This is actually tied into the fuel light up at the top of the dashboard, and it ties in that way. So, and I think what it is it just senses when it reaches a certain point, it flicks on the fuel light to tell you that you don't have any fuel left. So I'm not really sure how that works. But oh, I also moved. You see that little wire hanging down? That's my horn. I moved that from, it used to be one of the switches on the old distribution panel, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole through right here, and got my horn. I'm pretty happy about that. So everything's good. Pretty happy the project progress this weekend. I guess next I'm going to order the gimbal ring gasket for there, and I am going to get the gimbal back on, get all the wires neatly tucked up behind there, go get my new, speaking of new blower and bilge pump for the stern area, moving right along, and then I will be done for a couple of months until it gets warm enough to do the engine. I'm not going to buy the engine until I'm sure that we're pretty close to past our last freeze, and that way I could run it in and actually take it to the lake, because it only comes with a 30-day warranty. That kind of puckers me up a little bit, but anyway, sorry for the rambling. It's been a long day and a lot of wires, but I think it's all nicely. Oh, and the little courtesy lights that I was going to put right here, which were the white LEDs, I didn't get to those because I think I'm going to try to figure out a different idea. I've also got one up in the front there too. I think I'm going to get like a little strip light that'll fit over the top of that I can screw down, that gives me the blue LEDs that I want. Alright, so I figured I'd give you kind of a how-to on how the electrics work in this boat. Kind of help some people out. Basically, in a 12-volt system, you have a positive and a negative, which gives you your voltage to each of your accessories in the boat. Positive being your red wire generally, and negative being a black wire. Now in this boat, it's a gray wire all throughout here, but let's just refer to it as black and red. So with a distribution panel, this panel, the way it was hooked up before is they wanted a 12 volts constant from the battery whenever it is hooked up to the battery. So that way you can run your blower, your bilge pump, or whatever, running lights, anchor light, without the ignition having to be on. So with that being said, I have my little label right there where my thumb is. It says 12 volt from battery. What this does is it goes in to the input down here, and then out from there it loops to each one of the fuses, which are beside the corresponding switch. And then out from the fuse it goes into the input side of the switch, and then from the switch is the output for each one of your accessories. So once again, you've got your 12 volt in to your fuse, which protects the fuse, the circuit from any overloading, so it'll pop first, and then out of the fuse goes into the switch, and then out from the switch goes to each piece of your equipment. So now you may ask, well, what is this for? This is my main circuit breaker for my ignition. It has nothing to do with this panel whatsoever. It's just as convenient for me to put it right in this location. It actually is for whenever you turn the key on, it is energized, and it provides the power to all the gauges, anything that has to do with the ignition side of this boat. These also have two pink wires, you can see right here. One of them runs back to the boat. It energizes the coil whenever you turn on the key. So you can't fire the engine unless the key is on. That's the idea. So each one of the pieces of equipment, now in a boat is a lot different than a car. A car, you have a chassis and you can just ground to anything that you want to. But with a boat, you have to run everything back to a certain spot for the ground. Well, on this boat, the ground is actually looped to all the gauges. And I wish I'd have taken a picture of when these were all out. But the ground lands, the first ground lands, which is like a 10 gauge wire or 12 gauge wire on the fuel gauge, and then it's looped to each one of these. And then there's a whole ton of these Molex plugs. You see a little Molex plug right there, that actually do the distribution for each of the wires. And then those little gray wires, which are the grounds, go to each piece of each light or accessory or something like that. So you don't have just a power wire going to it. You have to have both the ground and the power. So a little education on that as far as the 12 volt system. And of course, with a boat, it's all protected by this main circuit breaker back here, which goes on the intake manifold of the engine. So the engine actually is the breaker for the whole boat. So if you unplug this piece right here from the engine, your boat is dead. And of course, the battery attaches to this harness, which is attached to your engine. So that, kind of gives you an idea how that all works. And of course, I have some ground wires back here because they're close to the battery, like for the back running light, the bilge, and the bilge blower.